Like Prospero's Island, our estate is full of noises, sounds and sweet airs that give delight and hurt not. We're in the London suburb of Muswell Hill. Alexandra Palace is about half a mile away to the north. It's 8 o'clock on the morning of July the 1st, 2000. I'm standing on the hill at one of the entrances to the estate. We're getting ready for our Millennium Party that's taking place this afternoon. This is number 1 Rookfield Avenue, the first house to be built on the estate in 1906. I live at 15. When we first moved here, it was a pretty dull place, and my wife said, "Don't put any shelves up, we're not staying." That was in June 1960, and we've been here ever since. We're lucky enough to have the green in Rookfield Close to play on. Over the years, it's been the focal point for most of our parties.
So you got a 5 with a 6 in the middle, and then a 5. So you should be making up three-piece ones.
I keep ordering that.
In 1977, all the residents got together to celebrate the Queen's Silver Jubilee here.
We went round to Anne Browning's house to make a poster. And you were wearing a red dress.
Did you take part in any of the races at the...
Was it that year that I trained for months for the three-legged race?
Probably.
Yeah.
And then he beat me and he hadn't trained and I was so upset.
Sometimes a little bit of magic can do the trick.
There's only one of them, and it's got...
These are a few of the events that we put on during the 1980s. For the 50th anniversary of VE Day, some of the residents got back into their wartime gear. Here are factory girls explaining why obesity wasn't much of a problem in those days. As my drill sergeant used to say, prior preparation plays a prominent part in preventing a pitiful performance.
Doris hasn't told me what she's doing either. You know, she'll do whatever. I've got a trifle, sort of a biscuited berry pudding and a fruit flour.
Ah, that's good. The magic seems to have worked. This is a map of the land and property W.J. Collins bought for development in 1899. Here you can see its main features laid over a plan of the present-day estate. This is the old Rookfield house where Collins and his family lived for a few years at the beginning of the 20th century. W.J. is on the right. Sitting at the front is his son Herbert, who built Rookfield Avenue. His son Billy built the rest of the estate.
Billy was the man who had some flair. He had a wonderful three-dimensional sense and could understand the whole concept of the estate, whereas I think Herbert was rather more individual houses of various characters, but not some composition. And I think the thing that made Billy's contribution so excellent was that he saw the whole thing like a village. And here we have the example of the variety in detailing of the roofs, which is so much a feature of Billy's work. You have these the gable ends to stop the ends of the terraces. You've got arches under the gables there. You've got some lovely little details over the centre of the window, a slightly higher set of panes there with a tiny little hipped gable sticking out over that, which gives it so much character in a little dormer. Then there are double dormers and single dormers, and then there's the flats, forming a rather formal end to the whole square, with the three arches, one larger in the middle, and then a beautiful little plaque over the top.
Well, we've got.
Brian?
It's very unlikely there were parties like this on the close in the early years of the estate.
We'll be needing them very soon.
For a start, eating in public was frowned on in those days. And though people probably got up to much the same things behind their net curtains as we do today, they were far less inclined to share it with the neighbours.
Places with you and him so you can get him at the sun.
And now for a quick commercial.
I'm Philip Magnus, and my wife and I and our two children lived in Rookfield Close, here in Rookfield Close, until about a year ago. We miss the Rookfields from the point of view that there's a very strong community spirit here. Great place for the children to play in the streets, no through traffic, lovely architecture, lots of greenery, lots of trees. Quite unique, I would think, in northern London.
Nice as the close is, especially in the spring, there was a time apparently in the 20s and 30s when it was much grander than it is now and had an ornamental lake with a bridge over it at its centre. All that disappeared during the Second World War when the green was dug up to build air raid shelters. You can still see their outline on the grass. As for the war itself, the estate managed to escape the kind of devastation caused by a flying bomb marked with a cross on the map that fell at the bottom of Muswell Hill. This is a lump of the casing which finished up at the end of Cranmore Way, fortunately without injuring anyone. But not everybody on the estate was so lucky. There were some casualties. A high explosive bomb fell in the back garden of 17 Rookfield Avenue.
Obviously, very sad event, because I think what was actually happening was the family were sheltering in the Anderson shelter in the back garden, and although the bomb didn't actually hit it, it landed in the back garden, and the family inside were found dead, suffering from the effects of blast. The young guy who was actually going out with the daughter, he couldn't get an answer at the front door, so he went round the back and he found them. It was basically the parents and the grown-up daughter in the Anderson shelter.
In the early years, many of the houses were rented out, especially in Cranmore Way, but whether you were a tenant or an owner, you were all bound by the same restrictive covenants, as the original lease of my house makes clear. It was formally forbidden to use or permit to be used any part of the house for a Roman Catholic church or a chapel or a hospital theatre or a lunatic asylum.
Sarah, how old are you?
4.
Do you go to school?
Yeah.
Where?
Muswell Hill.
Do you like it there?
Yeah.
Who's your teacher?
James.
James.
And Michelle. Serious. Michelle.
You can't your room.
Oh
You won't go here.
no. I'll be good.
But listen back.
It's all right. What am I pressing? Right, tight. I'm going too tight now. Okay. Right. Whoops! You're all right.
Meanwhile, a few doors up the avenue, an interesting experiment in state-of-the-art planting techniques is getting underway. It's what you might call keeping up in the air with the Joneses. And please, children, don't try this at home if your mum's out and you haven't got the right kind of crane handy.
The crane will leave a through the gate, and this was the biggest crane we could get that would go through the gate at the top. And so what we end up with is the tree in the middle of the garden, and sheer manpower I think now has got to drag it towards the hole.
Take it in the middle then.
Yeah. Well, I'm going to go in the crane now, and I'm going to stay in the crane now, and watch me go.
So when did this all start? How long ago?
About 2 hours ago.
No, I mean the building of the decking.
We're going. It all started because the people at the back decided to erect a very nice balcony which stared straight into every window of our house. So we decided we would obscure their house with something, hence the tree.
Have you tried getting planning permission withdrawn?
Oh yeah, we did all that. We all wrote letters and planning permission was refused, but they have some time to appeal. And then, of course, we get to the point where someone has to make them actually take it down.
Elsewhere on the estate, the more traditional forms of gardening still go on.
My plan for my garden is to have as many plants that really like Muswell Hill.
And what are those? What kind of plants are they?
Mostly plants that like sort of terribly clay, horrible soil, like we have. I mean, improved, of course, with compost and sand and things like this. And of course, the pond, as you remember when I first made it, I really made this pond because nothing grew underneath the chestnut. But it's full of tadpoles, frogs, fish, lots of wonderful things to eat for fish. My granddaughter comes and spends all day just taking jars full of water out and looking at it.
It was since the war, but we did hear Mrs. Milligan next door, who used to live here, obviously, she was here during the war. She said, and before the war, she said she used to watch the ladies of this house coming out in the early morning in their hats with their baskets, clipping the flowers. And it was a garden apparently in house and garden, pre-war. So I think they had arches, and we've unearthed the pathways and the rockery.
Your houses were actually built along that road, and the road itself is just over here, and it curves around like that, judging from where Grove Lodge is, you see, where you come out onto there.
Yes.
And that makes our garden around here, that corner of the garden.
Yeah. I got a lad with good muscles, and he cleared all the brambles from this area, and as he did it, the rockery emerged.
Amazing.
And we have never seen the rockery in 30 years, whatever it is. We have never seen this rockery. And also the little pond, there's a tiny baby pond at the top.
Yeah.
And we uncovered that. We knew it was there. We uncovered it.
Yeah.
And there's a little stream which only runs as a stream when it's been raining heavily, which is apparently the situation. And so now it's a woodland edge. So now I'm trying to have a woodland edge with wildlife plants.
There doesn't seem to have been much change in the kind of people living on the estate since it was first built.
It would be good. She's from around there. It's her favourite market at the moment. She was amazing.
Good neighbours are a bit like family. You don't choose them or even necessarily see them all that often, but they're always around if you need them.
Sit down, Monty, sit.
Just sit in the wet.
All right, okay, look, let's start. Look, this is the Duffy family. I'm Daddy Duffy and this is Mummy Duffy, and these are our 4 children. Called?
Peter.
Aged?
8. Emily, 6. Saturday, 4. 2 till 10.
Okay.
Freddie, 10.
And we've lived in Rookfield for 10 years. And every road in London has to have an Irish family. and we are the Irish family of Rookfield Avenue, 1990 to 2000.
And these days, every road seems to have an Irish skip in it too. Not something that was available in the 60s, when a wave of young families discovered the charms the estate offered and started moving in.
When we came in, the whole place was like heaven knows what, because nobody had been here for years. And the children discovered the staircase, and they did nothing but run up one side, across the top of the house, down the other, vroom, 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 vroom. I dashed up to Batty and Stevens, or whoever it was at the time, and said we wanted the house. And there was another man there saying he wanted it, and I just about had a fit. And I shouted, "You're not having that house, it's mine, I want it."
In some ways, the newcomers did more damage to the houses than the Luftwaffe had ever achieved. In went the hardboard and the kitchen units, and out came the ideal boilers and built-in dressers and all the other antiquated remnants of Edwardian England.
Now, come into the hall, walk into the...
Come into the garden.
Now, that fireplace is an original, isn't it?
Yes.
It's very nice, that, isn't it?
Yes, it is.
Because when we first came, in the 60s, we took out all the fireplaces and removed some of the mouldings and so on and painted everything white. And we were really after the Bauhaus appearance, you know, and stuff. And I think on balance that is the wrong thing to do.
Wrong or not, revolution was in the air.
68, May 68. And then you had various other things like the Little Red School Book. And I can remember the opening line in the Little Red School Book was, "All parents are paper tigers."
Ever since then, of course, children have run riot. Screaming, beating up adults, jumping up and down on pogo sticks, on skateboards, on sofas, and even dealing. But back in the 60s, it took a brave child to stand up against the established authority figures.
So I thought it was very exciting, this petition. I didn't care what it was really, it was just a petition and everyone was signing it. So I decided to take a role in getting the petition signed, and it was against the school meals, saying that they were terrible and something had to be done. And so for a few weeks, probably wasn't for very long, a few of us would go around the playground encouraging people to sign the petition. And finally we got X number of signatures, and I volunteered to take it home and write a letter on the typewriter to the Hornsey Journal.
Oh my God!
So
how subversive!
We sent it to the Hornsey Journal, and the next thing we knew, after playtime, after lunchtime one day, we were all of a sudden our class was taken by Miss Froud herself, not by our normal teacher, and so began the Grand Inquisition. Starting off with, how many of you here write to the Junior Journal?
As if inspired by their children, some of the incoming parents seized control of the Rookfield Association, which was on the point of getting the council to take over the roads. Why would the council want to do that?
The events which led to the making of the roads were that the mayor of Haringey, who was an alderman Gelley, who lived at number 6, was it Rookfield Close?
I think so, yeah.
Couldn't get his mayoral car around the close because of the massive potholes.
I see.
He complained to the council, and they resurrected a scheme which had been prepared by the former Hornsey Council to make up the roads under the private streetworks procedure.
The Freemans lived in number...
That one there,
12.
didn't they? Yeah. I remember that. Because he was the treasurer.
He was the treasurer
and
of the old committee.
And resigned when we wanted to make up the roads ourselves. He wanted the council to take over.
So the council take over, and we were going to have 6-foot pavements. Yes.
Although the residents do have a liability in accordance with the covenants attached to their leases and conveyances in the case of freeholds to maintain the roads, nobody had actually done anything to them since the houses were built, and they were badly potholed. They were a dust bowl in the summer and a quagmire in the winter.
This is the way Rookfield Avenue looked in the 1960s. almost completely free of cars. But one of the very few that were around then was this Rover belonging to Eric Day. Meanwhile...
Tight, boys?
Yes.
Go!
Oh,
I'm going to loosen it.
Yes!
Go on. Good. Yes. Good. All right, hold on.
He seemed to be losing interest in the proceedings. So does he. But there are times when a concern for hygiene has to take precedence over everything else.
But I rose to the lofty rank of toilet monitor. Cynical.
That was at Tin Pot, as the old prefab primary school was known. Then, in the 1980s, a new wave of young people started setting up home on the estate, and another baby boom began.
We had this wren that appeared in the back garden and started to build a nest in the hanging basket. And we looked it up and discovered that apparently the male it's the male wren that builds the nest, and he builds about half a dozen, and then in order to woo his female, and then the woman, the female bird, comes along and chooses which nest she would like. And we all said no woman would choose a hanging basket by a back door that's going to get watered every morning. But she did choose it, and they did have eggs, and they hatched and everything. And then that was the year before last, and then they came back again this year.
Each of these changes, if the last kitchen went out and the new kitchen came in, it's sort of amazing how many kitchens that house has had.
By now, most of the children of the 60s had flown the nest, and grandchildren were beginning to appear.
What's it meant to be?
It's meant to be, the dancers are meant to be a little flower, and I'm a little flower, and I'm growing like this. And I was just putting my pollen away like this, and the bees are taking pollen from me like that. That's it. And then the wind comes, and then when the flower dies, I go like this. Again for next year. Ready for next year. And that's it.
This is a very recent grandchild, our first millennium baby. Her mum grew up in Rookfield Avenue and has just bought a house herself on the estate. But others are moving up.
Goodbye to Rookfield Avenue and all my dear friends. I'm sure you'll miss us, the noisy Irish people. Bye, Frank.
Bye, Frank.
Bye, Frank.
They may not be taking the kitchen sink, but what are they doing with those bathroom fittings? Further up the avenue, they found a new way to plant that tree. Get the tree on its side and roll it into the hole. Now the new owners arrived. The Duffys are running late. Right up until the end of his life, Billy Collins continued to keep an eye on the estate, some say in disguise on occasions, to make sure it was being properly looked after.
Billy Collins did come here because Alan was very interested, and he was interested because we hadn't done a lot to the house. And he sat in the hall there and said how lovely and cool it was. He was very hot. It was a hottish day. Yeah. He was very little short man, very...
I think he died fairly soon after.
He did. He was very frail. I think Alan had to help him up the steps or something, I think. And he was very tottery, but bright-minded, bright as a button in his head.
The year before he died, the estate was designated a conservation area. Shortly afterwards, Haringey's planning office issued this pamphlet as a guide to the special qualities of the buildings and reminding residents that any extensions or other changes they might want to make must stay sensitive to the Collins family's original design.
I think the residents should take more responsibility, frankly. Yes, give them guidance, but if they have a problem with a planning application, it's really for them to take it on.
That reminds me, time for another commercial. But no flipping. Our sponsor, the Lottery Millennium Festival Awards Committee, wouldn't like it.
As a long-standing committee member of the Rookfield Association, I have great pleasure in handing over this award from the Rookfield Association to Nita and Frank Hilton in connection with the Doomsday survey which they've been doing of the estate.
But all good things must come to an end.
Joelle number 20. Joelle got it spot on the donkey.
No, sorry. Is he little vicious?
Very.
Oh, he's very pretty.
07957
So you come off the at junction 2.
Oh, that's a good news.
To Canterbury, which is the
Yes.
A2M2, and then
After that,
takes you
I'm on
all
the
the way to Canterbury.
Yeah.
And then in Canterbury you look for the
I know that road, I
A257,
know that
Little
road.
Bourne, remember that
One
one?
second, can I follow you
You
onto
can
the North
follow me
Circular?
into the North Circular.
He's not. Yes, are we? Do you want to do a wee? I won't be stopping. No? Are you sure, Emmeline? Because we really won't be stopping.
You have to go. Go on, out you go with the girlies. Go on. Yes, put it on the floor. Can I go in the back with you? Frank, I love you dearly. Take care of yourself. Keep the head down. Keep working. Keep your mind active. It'll keep your body going. And it's done very well so far. I must say, taken into consideration.
Find another owner for it.
Find another owner, yeah. Are you going to advertise?
Yes, I have.
Uh-huh.
Okay.
Will you be sorry to lose her?
What do you think?
What we need is to push it down the hill.
I think it's the petrol not getting through.
Yeah, the battery sounds fine.
Well, it was a good battery. It's guaranteed for life.
Whose
the
life?
owner's
The owner's life, was it?
Yeah.
That's a nice guarantee.
Well, unfortunately, after 26 years, we've got to leave the Rookfields, so we're going somewhere smaller. Haven't got anywhere to put it.
Do you know where yet?
Yes, we hope to be going to Camden Town. And unfortunately, this has to go because I can't persuade any of you lot to do my garden.
People say, "Why are you still doing here? Why don't you move?" I say,
Why don't you move?
Yes, why don't you move? Why don't I move? I wouldn't know where to go. And I wouldn't know what to do without friends. And sometimes I hope friends wouldn't know what to do without me.
Yeah.
And I think it's a great mistake to move out into countries, and, you know, at this age.
Autumn already, as the poet Rimbaud said, and he was only 18. Underneath this bush is an old friend of mine, a female blackbird. A few months ago she was attacked by some animal and it left her rather the worse for wear. We can only hope she'll live to see another spring. A new day begins. I remember the heavy snowfall we had over Christmas 1962. Next morning I skied down Muswell Hill. A bit faster than this, I might say. This is Francis's garden, inspired by the all-white gardens at Sissinghurst. And I wonder what he's up to.
You're having...
As Samuel Beckett said, another bloody April. But then he wasn't lucky enough to live on the estate. Our blackbird seems pretty pleased about it. But nothing stands still. The new arrivals soon get into the swing of things.
It's a lovely feel, living in London with grass verges. I haven't had grass verges since I was a kid in Surrey. It's very nice. It's a very strong community feel, actually.
And what will the future bring for this little girl as she grows up on the Rookfields? There's an old legend which says that if a rainbow goes right across the sky, it means the dead are looking down and watching over us. So let's hope that Billy and Herbert and WJ are doing just that and will go on doing it for many years to come, protecting their estate from property speculators, nuclear missiles and council traffic schemes, so that all the noises, sounds and airs around us stay as sweet as always for future generations to enjoy.